Willow Creek was a town that prided itself on tranquility. Tree-lined streets, brick-paved sidewalks, and the low hum of daily life gave residents a sense of safety that was rarely interrupted. On this particular morning, the courthouse looked like it did any other day, an ordinary brick building with large windows reflecting the rising sun. Families entered slowly, some chatting softly, others clutching papers with dates and signatures, ready to attend hearings that usually passed without much attention. Yet beneath the calm, an unspoken tension hummed in the air. Something subtle but tangible inside. The courtroom was already filling. Reporters adjusted their cameras, microphones, and notepads, preparing for a hearing that, on paper, promised to be routine. The local news had been tipped off that a minor theft case would be proceeding, but whispers circulated that a K-9 unit would be present, a rare sight for a courtroom in Willow Creek. Uniformed officers walked briskly down the polished wooden aisles, their boots clicking with authority. Their K-9 partners, sleek German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois, padded silently beside them, alert and disciplined. Sitting quietly in the third row was Emma, a small, fragile figure, only 3 years old. Her mother, Corinne, held her firmly on her lap. Emma's wide brown eyes darted around the room, absorbing everything with a mix of curiosity and caution. She had not yet mastered the ability to fully comprehend the events unfolding around her, but her keen instincts made her unusually attentive. Her tiny hands clutched a small stuffed rabbit, and her little legs dangled nervously, tapping occasionally against the edge of the seat. The judge entered with a quiet, deliberate air, his black robe flowing behind him. Judge Harmon was known for his stern demeanor, a man who had presided over hundreds of cases without surprise or disruption. Today, he scanned the courtroom with practiced eyes, noting the presence of reporters, officers, and civilians alike. He called the hearing to order with a firm voice, his gavel punctuating the routine beginning of a day in court. The first witness was Officer Daniels, a seasoned K-9 handler who had worked in law enforcement for over a decade. Behind him, Rex, a German Shepherd with alert eyes and a powerful frame, stood quietly, his ears twitching at the slightest movement. Officer Daniels explained to the court the nature of the demonstration they were about to perform. Rex would showcase obedience commands, tracking skills, and controlled alert behaviors, everything trained to perfection over months of intensive work. Emma leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the dog. Unlike most children her age, she did not shy away from the sight of a large, imposing animal. Instead, there was a fascination in her gaze, a quiet intensity that drew attention. Corinne noticed her daughter's unusual focus, but said nothing, attributing it to normal childlike curiosity. Little did anyone realize that curiosity would soon become the center of an extraordinary event. The courtroom filled with murmurs as Rex followed every command flawlessly. Sit. Rex dropped to his haunches. Stay. He remained perfectly still, ears perked and eyes scanning. Alert. He lifted his head, sensing the environment, ready to react if needed. Each movement was precise, a testament to the countless hours Officer Daniels had invested in training. Reporters scribbled notes, capturing the performance for what was expected to be a short segment of human interest. Emma's fascination deepened. She began to mimic Rex's movements silently, her little fingers pointing, her lips forming commands she had never spoken before. The subtle gestures caught Officer Daniels' attention, though he attributed them at first to innocent mimicry. The judge, absorbed in procedural matters, barely noticed the tiny girl's silent interaction with the dog. However, in the quiet of her concentration, a connection began forming between the toddler and the highly trained K-9 as Officer Daniels continued demonstrating Rex's abilities. He instructed the dog to follow a complex series of movements, weaving between cones and responding to commands at a distance. Rex performed flawlessly, his body moving with a precision that made the audience gasp softly in admiration. Karen watched, proud but nervous, sensing that her daughter was unusually calm amidst the attention and noise. Emma's small fingers remained pointed at Rex's collar, her eyes unwavering, almost as if she were issuing commands of her own internally. The other children in the courtroom were restless, fidgeting and whispering to their parents. But Emma remained still, a silent observer. Her focus was magnetic. Even the officers noticed the intensity in her gaze. Murmurs rippled through the room as onlookers began commenting on how unusual it was for a child of such tender age to show such composure. Little did anyone know, the moment that would make this day unforgettable was quietly building. Invisible to all but the smallest participant, the atmosphere was a blend of curiosity and anticipation. The routine had become charged with an undercurrent of suspense. Reporters exchanged excited glances, sensing that something remarkable might be unfolding. Judge Harmon, maintaining his usual composure, continued calling witnesses, unaware that the highlight of the day was not the case, but a 3-year-old's interaction with a dog. In the quiet interplay between human and canine, a rare phenomenon was forming, a subtle, unspoken communication that defied conventional understanding. Karen whispered gently to Emma, asking if she wanted to hold the stuffed rabbit tighter. Emma merely shook her head, eyes never leaving Rex. Her tiny lips formed silent words, almost imperceptible, while her fingers stayed extended toward the dog. The quiet persistence of her gestures was mesmerizing. Officer Daniels tilted his head, noticing Rex's ears twitch in response. The dog's sudden alertness, subtle but unmistakable, drew the attention of others in the courtroom. The murmurs grew, and the ordinary morning was beginning to feel anything but ordinary. By the time Officer Daniels concluded the demonstration, the audience was captivated. Emma, still perched on her mother's lap, had not spoken a word aloud, yet a remarkable tension lingered in the air. Everyone sensed something extraordinary was about to happen, though no one could predict the simplicity and brilliance of the moment. The day in Willow Creek was no longer just about a minor theft case. In the quiet of the courtroom, the stage was set for a 3-year-old to change the course of ordinary proceedings forever with just 2 words. The doors of the courthouse opened again, and Officer Daniels stepped forward with Rex, the German shepherd whose reputation in Willow Creek preceded him. The dog's presence commanded attention immediately. His sleek coat gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and his sharp, intelligent eyes scanned the room, noting every movement, every whisper. The courtroom, already humming with quiet curiosity, seemed to hold its breath. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, adults whispered in low tones, and reporters clicked cameras discreetly, attempting to capture the rare appearance of a K-9 unit inside a courtroom. Rex moved with the confidence of a creature that knew its role well, a combination of discipline, training, and instinct. His paws made barely a sound on the polished floor, yet each step exuded authority. Officer Daniels gave a series of short, crisp commands, and the dog obeyed instantly, performing precise sit, stay, and alert routines. Emma, still perched on her mother's lap, leaned forward, her little hands gripping the edge of the seat. She watched every movement with an intensity that bordered on awe. Karen, her mother, noticed the unusual focus in her daughter's gaze. Emma rarely remained so quiet for long, especially around strangers or animals. Yet here she was, utterly captivated. Karen whispered softly, "Sweetheart, do you want to say hello?" Emma merely shook her head, her eyes fixed entirely on Rex. There was no fear, no hesitation, only fascination. The connection forming between child and dog was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone not paying close attention. But anyone who did notice could feel the tension building, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Officer Daniels began a demonstration of Rex's tracking skills. The dog navigated through a series of cones and obstacles, responding instantly to verbal and hand commands. The precision of Rex's movements impressed everyone. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Emma's tiny fingers twitched, as if mimicking the commands silently. She pointed toward Rex, her gestures deliberate. At first, Karen thought it was simply mimicry. Children often mirror what they see. But there was something different this time. Rex's ears twitched, his body shifted slightly, and he turned his head toward Emma, alert yet calm. The judge, unaware of the silent exchange, focused on procedural matters. He watched Officer Daniels present Rex's abilities with professional clarity, explaining how the dog was trained to respond to both commands and cues from his handler. Reporters leaned forward, jotting down notes, sensing the visual appeal of the demonstration. Cameras captured Rex's every movement, but they missed the small, extraordinary interaction unfolding in the corner. Emma's eyes tracked the dog like a hawk. She whispered to herself, her lips barely moving. She wasn't speaking words anyone could hear, but the intent in her gestures and tone was unmistakable. Rex paused mid-command, his body responding to a subtle, almost imperceptible cue. Officer Daniels noticed immediately. The dog's reaction did not align with any formal instruction he had given. Instead, it was as if Rex had something from Emma, a 3-year-old with no formal training, no prior experience with police dogs, yet somehow communicating a command with clarity. The courtroom noticed the shift. A few heads turned toward Emma. Whispers began to circulate. "Is the dog responding to the child?" One reporter asked quietly. Another shook her head, incredulous. Karen's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't understand what was happening, but she felt a strange mixture of pride and apprehension. Her daughter, so small, so young, had captured the attention of an entire courtroom. Emma's concentration never wavered. Her small fingers remained pointed, her lips barely forming sounds. Rex, highly trained and disciplined, responded instinctively. The dog's body stiffened slightly, his stance ready, alert, obedient, but there was no aggression, no chaos. The precision was uncanny. Officer Daniels exchanged a look with a fellow officer, both of them visibly astonished. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. Even the judge, a man accustomed to surprises, paused mid-note. "Is the child instructing the dog?" Someone whispered near the back. The notion seemed impossible, yet the evidence was there in Rex's focused response. Emma's presence alone had altered the dog's behavior. It was as if a silent conversation had passed between them, carried not through words, but through instinct, tone, and sheer presence. The courtroom was transfixed, all attention drawn to the tiny girl and the mighty K9 before her. Officer Daniels decided to test the connection further. He instructed Rex to remain in position while he stepped back several feet. The dog obeyed immediately, eyes still alert, and scanned the environment with unbroken focus. Emma's gaze remained locked on Rex as she raised her tiny fingers slightly, as if giving an unspoken command. Instantly, Rex adjusted his stance, responding in perfect alignment with her gesture. The courtroom gasped softly. The tension was electric. Everyone sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary, a moment that defied conventional explanation. The reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every detail, while parents whispered to one another in disbelief. Even seasoned law enforcement officers shook their heads in amazement. Karen tried to explain to herself that it was a coincidence, but she knew deep down it was more than that. Emma, her daughter, was communicating with a highly trained K9 in a manner that had never been documented. Her silent gestures, her intent gaze, and her presence had created a bridge between innocence and skill, instinct and discipline. The demonstration concluded with Rex performing a series of advanced maneuvers flawlessly. The courtroom erupted into polite applause, though the focus remained on Emma. Officer Daniels knelt down beside her, trying to mask his astonishment with a smile. "Well," he said softly, "I think Rex just made a new friend." Emma blinked, tilting her head in quiet acknowledgement, a small smile forming. It was an extraordinary moment of understanding, trust, and connection. Even the judge, now observing more closely, couldn't help but feel that the ordinary courtroom had transformed into a stage for something remarkable. By the time the morning session ended, the courthouse had shifted subtly. A story that began as a routine legal proceeding had become an unspoken narrative of wonder. Emma, small and fragile, had drawn the gaze of everyone present, not through words, but through a presence that commanded attention and respect. The connection with Rex, the canine trained to perfection, had captured hearts, inspired curiosity, and challenged assumptions about age, communication, and intuition. Willow Creek was about to remember this day, not for a theft case, but for a 3-year-old and her unprecedented bond with the police dog. Even after recess, whispers circulated. Lawyers discussed the rare interaction. Reporters speculated, and officers reviewed the demonstration mentally, trying to rationalize what had occurred. The air in the courthouse was thick with anticipation. Emma's silent engagement with Rex had turned a simple routine morning into a spectacle of intelligence, empathy, and extraordinary intuition. It was a quiet yet powerful reminder that sometimes the smallest, youngest participants can create the most unforgettable moments. The day had begun ordinary, but it was ending on the cusp of something historic. The courtroom had returned from recess, but the energy had shifted. What had once been ordinary proceedings now carried a subtle, electric tension. Emma, still perched on her mother's lap, seemed utterly unaware of the attention she was drawing, yet her presence commanded it nonetheless. Her wide brown eyes never left Rex, the German shepherd, who sat obediently near Officer Daniels, ears pricked and alert. Every subtle twitch of his body mirrored her silent focus. Karen, her mother, felt her pulse quicken. Something unusual was happening. This was no ordinary interaction between a child and a dog. It was something profound. As the hearing resumed, the judge called for the next demonstration from the K9 unit. Officer Daniels instructed Rex to move toward a small obstacle course set up for the courtroom display. The dog obeyed with precision, weaving between cones, stopping on command, alerting to subtle environmental cues. The audience watched in awe. Reporters leaned forward, jotting notes and clicking cameras. But no one's attention was as fixed as Emma's. She shifted slightly, pointing her tiny finger toward Rex, whispering words too soft for any adult to hear. Yet Rex's body responded in a way that could not be ignored. Karen whispered to her daughter, "Emma, what are you doing?" But Emma didn't respond. Her focus was absolute, her small frame tense with concentration. Officer Daniels noticed the dog's sudden heightened alertness. Rex's head tilted slightly, ears adjusting, and he took a subtle step forward, responding not to a command from the handler, but seemingly to the child. The courtroom murmured, observers exchanging puzzled glances. It was unprecedented. A trained K9 reacting to cues from a toddler who had never received formal training. The realization hung in the air like a fragile thread of amazement. Even the judge leaned slightly forward, frowning with curiosity. Judge Harmon was a man of routine and procedure, a figure not easily surprised. Yet his eyes tracked Emma's movements and Rex's responses with mounting astonishment. He had presided over hundreds of hearings, including demonstrations by K9 units, and had never witnessed such a precise, instinctive connection between a toddler and a trained dog. Whispers circulated among the courtroom staff. "Has anyone ever seen this before?" One clerk asked quietly. Others shook their heads. Even the seasoned officers were speechless. Rex's behavior was deliberate and calm, yet every movement indicated readiness. The dog's eyes, sharp and intelligent, seemed to acknowledge the tiny figure of Emma, whose gestures, subtle but intentional, guided him without overt commands. Officer Daniels knelt beside Emma, trying to observe without influencing the interaction. "I don't understand," he murmured under his breath, voice tinged with awe. "The dog is reacting to her, not me. This is impossible." Karen watched silently, heart pounding. Emma's quiet composure contrasted sharply with the growing astonishment around her. The reporters, initially focused on the K9 demonstration, turned their cameras toward Emma. They sensed the unfolding story, the extraordinary bond that was forming before their eyes. Their notes became frantic scribbles as they tried to capture every nuance. Children in the audience leaned forward, whispering among themselves, their curiosity piqued. Even older adults, hardened by years of legal proceedings, paused, captivated by the simple power of observation and instinct. The courtroom had transformed into a stage for something that defied explanation. The delicate dance of communication between child and dog. Emma's gestures grew more confident. She raised her finger slightly higher, her lips forming soft, almost imperceptible sounds. Rex adjusted instantly, ears flicking, body stiffening in readiness. The audience noticed the precision, the way a trained dog responded to subtle cues from a tiny, untrained child. Murmurs spread quickly. "Is she directing the dog?" whispered one parent. Another shook their head, incredulous. Officer Daniels' brow furrowed as he tried to rationalize what was happening. He knew Rex's behavior could not be random. The dog had never reacted like this to anyone but him. Karen felt a mix of awe and apprehension. Her daughter had always been intelligent, unusually observant for her age, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Emma's focus, her quiet authority, and her uncanny ability to influence Rex left Karen speechless. "Sweetheart," she whispered again, "you're amazing." Emma glanced briefly at her mother, then returned her attention to Rex, eyes wide and unwavering. It was clear that something extraordinary was taking shape, a bond that transcended words, age, and conventional understanding. The judge finally leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "Officer Daniels," he asked, his voice calm but curious, "has this dog ever responded to anyone other than you with such precision?" Officer Daniels shook his head, unable to hide his astonishment. "Never, Your Honor. Rex is trained to respond to my commands and cues, but right now, he's reacting to her. I've never seen anything like it." The courtroom collectively exhaled, realizing the enormity of what they were witnessing. Emma's influence over the dog was unprecedented, both remarkable and inexplicable. Rex's subtle movements continued, each step measured, precise, obedient, yet guided by Emma's quiet presence. The toddler's instincts, her untrained understanding of canine behavior, seemed to communicate through gestures and tone rather than words. Observers were spellbound. Even seasoned officers whispered in disbelief, marveling at the clarity of the interaction. For Emma, it was effortless. She had never trained with Rex, had never been exposed to police dogs formally. Yet in this moment, she possessed an authority that drew the dog's attention and respect, a silent command that rippled through the room. The murmurs of the audience grew, though no one dared interrupt. Everyone waited, sensing that something even more extraordinary was imminent. Children leaned closer to their parents, reporters poised cameras, and officers studied the scene with increasing curiosity. Judge Harmon, usually composed and measured, allowed a flicker of astonishment to cross his face. He observed the subtle communication unfolding, realizing that this was no ordinary courtroom event. The tiny girl, no larger than a briefcase in her mother's lap, had captured the attention of a powerful, highly trained canine. Karen's heart raced as she watched Emma maintain her focus. There was no fear, no hesitation, only clarity, precision, and an almost instinctual understanding of Rex's abilities. The connection was unspoken, but undeniable. Officer Daniels whispered softly to himself, "I need to document this. This is historic." The courtroom remained captivated, the usual chatter and routine hearings fading into insignificance. Emma and Rex had created a moment that demanded attention, a rare demonstration of intuition and communication that defied explanation, leaving every observer both amazed and unsettled. By the time the session drew toward the end of Part 3, the subtle connection had grown stronger. Emma's gestures and glances guided Rex with flawless clarity. The dog's posture, alert yet controlled, reflected a responsiveness that transcended normal training. The courtroom had become silent, everyone drawn into the extraordinary interaction. Emma, oblivious to her fame, simply remained attentive, focused, and calm, a tiny figure wielding influence in a room filled with adults. For Willow Creek, the ordinary courthouse was now the site of something unforgettable, a quiet, miraculous bond forming between a 3-year-old and a remarkable K9. The courtroom had settled into an almost reverent silence. Emma remained on her mother's lap, her wide brown eyes locked onto Rex, the German shepherd, whose alert posture mirrored her unwavering attention. Officers, reporters, and spectators alike held their breath, sensing the extraordinary tension that had quietly built over the morning. Karen, her heart pounding, whispered, "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Emma's small head barely turned, her focus absolute, as if the world beyond Rex had vanished. The audience waited, uncertain what might happen next, caught between disbelief and anticipation. Officer Daniels, kneeling near the dog, carefully monitored Rex's responses. The K9 was attentive, responsive, and unusually reactive to the subtle gestures of the toddler. Every minute twitch of Emma's finger, every soft murmur she made, seemed to influence Rex in ways the officers could barely comprehend. He had never reacted to a civilian like this, much less a 3-year-old. The demonstration, originally routine, had become an extraordinary display of intuition, observation, and communication that transcended conventional understanding. Even the judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised, curiosity and astonishment dancing in his eyes. Then it happened. Emma, small and delicate, her voice barely above a whisper, spoke 2 words with clarity that belied her age. "Catch him." The courtroom froze. The words were simple, yet their effect was monumental. Every head turned, jaws slack, eyes wide. A 3-year-old, entirely untrained, had spoken directly to a professional police dog, and Rex had responded immediately, alert and poised. The precision of the dog's reaction was astonishing. He lifted his head, focused intently on the area where Emma had indicated, ears forward, muscles taut yet controlled, ready for action. It was an instinctive response that no one had ever expected from a toddler. Karen gasped quietly, her hand gripping Emma's tiny fingers in a mix of pride and disbelief. Did you just say that?" she whispered. Emma nodded, eyes still focused, a small smile playing on her lips. The courtroom erupted into murmurs of astonishment. Officers whispered among themselves, trying to rationalize what had happened. Reporters scrambled to record the moment, aware they were witnessing something extraordinary, something newsworthy beyond measure. Even the judge's gavel remained suspended mid-air, a rare lapse in his usual stern composure. Officer Daniels knelt closer to Emma, whispering softly, "Rex understood you. He responded to you." His voice trembled with amazement. The dog's obedience was flawless, a testament to years of training, but now it seemed as though Emma had become a silent partner in that training. Every adult in the courtroom tried to process what they were seeing. The precision, clarity, and effectiveness of a 3-year-old's communication with a trained canine was unprecedented. Whispers of disbelief, excitement, and awe swept across the room. Rex took a few controlled steps forward, responding exactly to Emma's two-word command. The courtroom held its breath, captivated by the unexpected demonstration. His movements were deliberate, precise, yet imbued with the instinctive readiness of a police dog trained for high-pressure scenarios. No aggression, no chaos, only disciplined obedience, guided by the toddler's simple yet effective command. The audience marveled at the improbable interaction. A tiny human influencing a powerful, trained animal with nothing more than intent and clarity. The judge, finally regaining composure, leaned forward. "Officer Daniels," he said, his voice steady but laced with astonishment. "Has any child, let alone a toddler, ever influenced a canine in this manner?" Officer Daniels shook his head slowly. "Never, Your Honor. Rex responds to me, his handler. This is extraordinary." He recognized her command instantly, and the precision. "I've never seen anything like it in my career." A hush fell over the courtroom as the weight of the moment sank in. Everyone realized they were witnessing history in the making. Emma's mother struggled to maintain composure, her mind racing to make sense of the scene. Her daughter, so small and delicate, had just demonstrated authority, clarity, and instinct far beyond her years. She had communicated with a highly trained police dog in a way that defied logic. Karen whispered softly to Emma, "You're amazing, sweetheart." Emma blinked, then returned her gaze to Rex, entirely unshaken by the attention or astonishment surrounding her. Her calm composure amplified the wonder of the moment. The courtroom remained spellbound as Rex executed the command flawlessly. His powerful body moved with precision, every step purposeful. Officers took note, recognizing the extraordinary nature of a canine responding to a non-handler, a child who had never been trained. Reporters scrambled to capture the footage, scribbling notes furiously, realizing they were witnessing a story that would resonate far beyond Willow Creek. Every observer sensed the improbable, the remarkable, and the unforgettable unfolding before them. Children in the courtroom leaned closer to their parents, wide-eyed, whispering about the tiny girl who had tamed a police dog. Adults whispered similarly, sharing theories, disbelief, and awe. Even seasoned law enforcement officers exchanged incredulous glances. The scene defied expectations, challenging assumptions about age, communication, and intuition. A 3-year-old had achieved what seasoned professionals could not replicate: a flawless, instinctive connection with a highly trained canine. The room seemed suspended in time, captivated by the improbable yet undeniable reality. The judge, usually calm and authoritative, allowed a flicker of wonder to cross his face. He adjusted his glasses and leaned closer, examining the interaction between child and dog. "I must admit," he said softly, "I have never witnessed anything like this in all my years on the bench." His words, measured yet genuine, rippled through the room. Reporters jotted down every detail, officers remained alert, and spectators continued to marvel. The ordinary courtroom had transformed into a stage for something extraordinary, a living example of instinct, courage, and clarity. Officer Daniels continued to monitor Rex, noting the dog's continued responsiveness. Every subtle twitch of Emma's fingers, every soft word from her lips, guided Rex without error. The dog's posture reflected obedience, alertness, and readiness, all triggered not by formal commands, but by a child's instinctive communication. Karen whispered again, "Sweetheart, do you know what you've done?" Emma simply smiled faintly, tilting her head as though acknowledging the question, then returned her attention to Rex. The unspoken bond was unmistakable, a silent exchange of trust and understanding between girl and dog. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder, but no one interrupted. The room was collectively holding its breath, captivated by the precision of the moment. Reporters leaned closer, cameras trained on Emma and Rex, recognizing the rarity of what they were witnessing. Even those accustomed to legal procedures and canine demonstrations were speechless. The ordinary hearing had been transformed into an extraordinary showcase of intuition, observation, and communication. Every observer understood the significance. A 3-year-old had just influenced a trained police dog in a way no one thought possible. Karen, barely containing her emotions, allowed herself a quiet smile. She had always known Emma was observant, intelligent, and unusually perceptive. But this was beyond expectation. Emma's tiny 2 words, delivered with clarity and confidence, had demonstrated authority, understanding, and instinct that transcended age. The courtroom remained transfixed, captivated by the seemingly impossible scene. The mundane proceedings of the morning had been eclipsed by a single, astonishing interaction. A 3-year-old and a German Shepherd, communicating effortlessly and precisely, in a way that would be remembered long after the day ended. Even as the session progressed, whispers of amazement continued. "Did you see that?" A toddler gave a command. A dog obeyed perfectly. The word spread, carried by astonished onlookers and curious reporters. Officer Daniels nodded slowly, silently acknowledging the unique moment that had unfolded. Judge Harmon, regaining his usual composure, but still visibly impressed, allowed the next steps of the hearing to proceed, though everyone's focus remained partially on the extraordinary interaction. Emma, tiny and seemingly fragile, had captured the attention and hearts of everyone present, leaving a mark on Willow Creek that would endure for years. By the end of Part 4, the magnitude of Emma's achievement was clear. 2 simple words, "Catch him," had created a ripple of astonishment, admiration, and wonder. A 3-year-old had commanded attention, influenced a trained canine, and left an entire courtroom in awe. The ordinary day had become extraordinary, and everyone present sensed that they were witnessing a rare, historic event. Emma's innocence, clarity, and courage had transformed the mundane into the unforgettable. Willow Creek would not forget the morning. A tiny girl spoke 2 words that stunned a police dog and the judge, the officers, and every observer in the room. The courtroom remained suspended in awe. Emma, a tiny figure on her mother's lap, had just spoken 2 words, "Catch him," and every eye was riveted on the extraordinary scene unfolding. Rex, the German Shepherd, had shifted instantly, his body taut with alertness, yet perfectly controlled. The precision of his movements, prompted solely by a toddler's voice and gestures, astonished everyone. Officer Daniels, kneeling near the dog, could barely contain his amazement. He had trained Rex for years, yet never had the dog responded to anyone else in such a flawless, instinctive manner. The moment was historic, unprecedented, and mesmerizing. Rex took a deliberate step forward, moving with the measured grace of a creature that had been trained for precision, obedience, and tactical awareness. His powerful paws made barely a sound on the polished wooden floor. Every muscle seemed to respond to Emma's subtle cues, the tilt of her head, the faint lift of her finger, the soft tone in her voice. Karen's heart pounded in her chest as she watched her daughter's tiny form guide the dog's movements. She whispered, "Emma, you're incredible." But Emma barely responded, completely absorbed in her connection with Rex. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft scuffling of Rex's paws. Reporters leaned closer, cameras focused, capturing what might be a once-in-a-lifetime story. Spectators exchanged incredulous glances. How could a 3-year-old, untrained and inexperienced with K9 units, direct a powerful, highly trained German Shepherd with such clarity? Even seasoned officers whispered among themselves, incredulous. "I've never seen anything like it," murmured one. She's controlling him without even touching him." The words hung in the air, as everyone realized that the ordinary hearing had transformed into an extraordinary display of instinct and communication. Rex continued, moving toward the designated demonstration area with perfect obedience. His ears remained forward, eyes sharp, and stance alert. Yet there was no sign of aggression, only the readiness inherent in a trained police dog. Every step mirrored Emma's subtle guidance. Her gestures, almost imperceptible, commanded precision that belied her age. The courtroom's attention was total. Whispers turned into soft exclamations of amazement. Even Judge Harmon, known for his stern and reserved demeanor, leaned forward slightly, unable to hide a flicker of astonishment. The unassuming toddler had captured the attention and admiration of everyone present. Officer Daniels, kneeling at Rex's side, observed intently. "He's responding directly to her cues," he whispered to a fellow officer. "I've never seen this. He's never done this for anyone else." His voice trembled with excitement. The dog's responsiveness to Emma's quiet authority was flawless. Each subtle gesture from the toddler prompted precise movement from the canine. Emma's focus was unwavering. Her concentration matched the dog's discipline. Observers could feel the connection forming between them, a silent, instinctive communication that transcended words, age, and expectation. Emma's tiny hands remained raised slightly, guiding Rex with subtle shifts of her fingers and faint murmurs that only she and the dog seemed to understand. Karen felt a mix of pride, awe, and nervousness. Her daughter, so small and delicate, had just created a connection that no one could explain. The whispers in the courtroom grew louder as spectators tried to process what they were witnessing. "How is this possible?" One parent murmured. She's controlling the dog," another whispered, eyes wide. The energy in the room was electric. Charged with amazement and disbelief, Rex approached the demonstration area, moving precisely as Emma's gestures indicated. He paused, alert, responding to the tiny cues with flawless obedience. Every spectator watched, captivated by the rare interplay between child and canine. Even the journalists, trained to spot stories, recognized the significance. They scribbled notes frantically, capturing the extraordinary moment for a public that would scarcely believe it. The courtroom, once a place of routine, had become a stage for a miracle of instinct and understanding. Every eye remained fixed on Emma and Rex, transfixed by the improbable spectacle. The judge, regaining a semblance of composure, finally spoke. "Officer Daniels, is it normal for a child to communicate with a police dog in this way?" Officer Daniels shook his head slowly, voice filled with awe. "Absolutely not, Your Honor. Rex is trained to respond to me, his handler, and occasionally to other trained officers. But he's never, ever responded to a toddler. This is unprecedented. The dog recognizes her command and responds with complete precision. I don't know how to explain it." His words rippled through the courtroom, leaving spectators even more amazed. Karen whispered to Emma again, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "Do you know what you've done, sweetie?" Emma tilted her head, her eyes never leaving Rex. She didn't answer verbally, but nodded faintly, as if acknowledging that she understood the power of the moment. The bond between the toddler and the dog was tangible. Every observer could feel it, a rare exchange of trust and comprehension that transcended conventional logic. It was as though Emma and Rex shared a language no one else could understand. A silent, instinctive dialogue. Rex continued his demonstration under Emma's guidance. He navigated obstacles, paused at commands, and responded with perfect precision. His powerful body moved effortlessly, yet every step was guided by a subtle authority emanating from a child no taller than a chair. The courtroom watched, enthralled. Adults whispered theories, children gasped in fascination, and reporters continued to scribble notes furiously. Officer Daniels monitored carefully, awe written across his face, realizing that no one had ever witnessed such an untrained yet perfect interaction. This moment would be remembered as a unique display of instinct, intuition, an unexpected brilliance. As Rex completed his final movement, the courtroom erupted into polite applause, though the focus remained on Emma. The toddler, calm and composed, simply smiled faintly, acknowledging the attention without becoming overwhelmed. Karen felt tears prick at her eyes, filled with pride and amazement. The ordinary courthouse hearing had become a defining moment in her daughter's young life. Reporters whispered excitedly, capturing footage and speculating about the story that would captivate the town and beyond. Even Judge Harmon, usually composed and serious, allowed himself a small smile of astonishment. Children in the audience stared wide-eyed at Emma and Rex, whispering among themselves about the tiny girl who had commanded the dog. Adults exchanged incredulous glances, trying to rationalize the moment. The story was already forming in their minds. A 3-year-old issuing a command to a professional canine, and the dog responding flawlessly. Officer Daniels shook his head, trying to process what had occurred. She didn't just speak, she influenced, guided, and directed him with absolute precision, he murmured. This is something we've never seen before. Karen gently pulled Emma onto her lap, holding her close. The toddler remained serene, eyes occasionally glancing toward Rex, who now sat obediently near Officer Daniels, alert but calm. The courtroom slowly regained composure, though murmurs and whispers continued. Everyone understood the rarity of the moment. A 3-year-old had done what seasoned officers never could, communicate perfectly with a trained, disciplined canine through intuition, presence, and quiet authority. The extraordinary interaction had transformed a routine morning in Willow Creek into an unforgettable event. The courtroom had slowly settled into an uneasy silence after Rex's flawless response to Emma's 2 words. Murmurs still echoed in corners, but all eyes remained fixed on the tiny girl and the canine, who now sat obediently at Officer Daniels' side. Judge Harmon, a man known for his composure and meticulous attention to detail, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, his brow furrowed in a mixture of astonishment and curiosity. He had witnessed hundreds of courtroom demonstrations in his career, including highly skilled canine performances, but never had he seen such a precise interaction between a toddler and a trained police dog. Officer Daniels, the judge began carefully, his voice calm but edged with incredulity. Is this standard procedure? Has a child ever influenced a canine like this in your experience? Officer Daniels shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. No, Your Honor. Not in my 12 years of service have I witnessed anything like this. Rex has responded to thousands of commands from trained handlers, and even in simulations, his reactions are precise. But what we just observed? Impossible. The dog responded to Emma, without training, without prior exposure, pure instinct, pure connection. Karen's hands trembled slightly in her lap as she watched the interaction unfold. She felt pride swelling in her chest, mixed with awe and a touch of nervous apprehension. Her daughter, so small and delicate, had managed to command attention in a way that transcended age, training, and expectation. The words "catch him" had not only moved a powerful, disciplined canine, they had stunned an entire courtroom, including its presiding judge. Karen whispered softly to Emma, "Do you understand what you've done, sweetheart?" Emma tilted her head, her eyes unwavering, and gave a faint nod, as though acknowledging the weight of her accomplishment without fully realizing it. The judge took a moment, leaning back slightly, his expression shifting from measured curiosity to genuine amazement. He turned to the courtroom, gesturing subtly for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice steady yet tinged with wonder. "What we have witnessed today is unprecedented. A 3-year-old child, entirely untrained with canine units, has issued commands that were recognized and executed flawlessly by a highly trained police dog. This is extraordinary. I have never, in all my years, seen anything remotely comparable. The room remained hushed, absorbing the gravity of his words. Officer Daniels, kneeling near Rex, observed the dog with renewed focus. The canine remained calm, obedient, and alert, but there was a subtle acknowledgement in his eyes, a connection established, reinforced by Emma's clarity and intent. The officers whispered among themselves, trying to articulate what they were witnessing. "It's not just obedience," one murmured. "It's recognition, understanding, connection. She's extraordinary." The words felt inadequate to describe the scene. A tiny girl, barely 3, had accomplished something that years of professional training could not replicate. Mutual understanding with a highly disciplined canine. Reporters scrambled to capture every detail, recognizing the newsworthiness of the moment. Cameras clicked, microphones recorded, and notebooks filled with frantic scribbles. The story was already taking shape in their minds. 3-year-old commands police dog, stuns courtroom. Adults whispered in awe, discussing the improbability of the event, while children in the gallery leaned forward, eyes wide, inspired by the tiny girl's bravery and focus. Even hardened law enforcement officers were captivated, acknowledging the extraordinary skill displayed by someone so young, so small, yet so precise in command. Karen watched her daughter carefully, a mixture of pride, astonishment, and disbelief washing over her. Emma, oblivious to her own fame, remained focused on Rex, her fingers subtly guiding him, her eyes reflecting calm authority. The interaction was effortless for the child, instinctive in its precision. Every subtle gesture was mirrored by the dog, every soft whisper echoed in action. The courtroom had become a stage for something remarkable, an unspoken, intuitive communication between a toddler and a professional, canine that defied conventional understanding and captured the imagination of every observer. Judge Harmon, now fully attentive, called a brief recess to confer privately with Officer Daniels. Whispers spread through the courtroom as everyone speculated about the implications. The idea that a child could so effectively communicate with a highly trained police dog challenged everything they thought they knew about age, instinct, and authority. "Do you think this has ever happened before?" a reporter asked quietly. Officer Daniels shook his head. "Not like this. Not with precision. Not with this calm, intuitive authority. It's unparalleled." Back in the courtroom, Emma remained calm on her mother's lap. Her eyes tracked Rex's every movement, and her tiny hands continued to provide subtle guidance. The dog, obedient and alert, responded with complete precision. Children whispered among themselves, inspired and fascinated. Adults shook their heads in disbelief, struggling to comprehend the scene. The ordinary proceedings of the day, expected to be mundane and predictable, had been transformed into a moment of wonder, a display of instinct, intuition, and extraordinary communication that would be remembered for years to come. When the recess concluded, the judge returned, his expression now a mixture of curiosity, amazement, and measured authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said slowly, "we have just witnessed something that defies explanation, something that will likely be studied, discussed, and remembered for a long time. Emma, your clarity, your focus, and your ability to communicate with Rex, a highly trained canine, has astonished everyone here. Your actions demonstrate courage, precision, and intuition far beyond your years." Karen felt tears prick at her eyes as the courtroom applauded, though softly, in reverence for the moment. Officer Daniels knelt near Emma once more, speaking quietly to the toddler. "Rex recognizes you, Emma. You've done something remarkable." The child, her eyes reflecting calm confidence, nodded faintly, acknowledging the praise without vanity. The bond between Emma and Rex had been established through subtle gestures, clarity, and instinctive understanding. Every observer recognized that this was more than a demonstration. It was a rare instance of intuitive communication, a connection that transcended training, age, and expectation. Reporters whispered excitedly, capturing footage and imagining the headlines that would follow. Toddler commands police dog in courtroom, a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Spectators continued to murmur in awe, trying to process the extraordinary display. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed, inspired by the tiny girl who had influenced a professional K-9. Even the seasoned officers, trained to expect the unexpected, were captivated, acknowledging that the simplicity and precision of Emma's 2 words had created a rare, historic moment in Willow Creek. Karen held Emma tightly, her mind racing with wonder and disbelief. She had always known her daughter was observant, intelligent, and unusually perceptive, but this was something far beyond ordinary understanding. Emma's instincts, clarity, and calm authority had commanded attention and admiration from an entire courtroom. Judge Harmon allowed the proceedings to continue, though every adult in the room remained partially focused on the child and the dog. The ordinary courthouse had been transformed into a stage for something rare, unforgettable, and extraordinary. By the following week, Willow Creek was buzzing with anticipation and curiosity. The courthouse, once a quiet and orderly building, had become a point of fascination. Locals whispered about the 3-year-old who had stunned the town, a tiny girl whose 2 words, "Catch him," had commanded the respect and obedience of a highly trained police dog. Karen walked through the streets, Emma in her stroller, and noticed neighbors peering curiously from porches. Word had spread like wildfire. Reporters were already calling for interviews, eager to capture the story of a toddler whose presence and instinct had transformed a routine legal demonstration into a historic moment. Emma remained blissfully unaware of the attention she had drawn. She clutched her small stuffed rabbit, her wide brown eyes scanning every new sight with quiet curiosity. The toddler had no understanding of the extraordinary impact she had made, yet her natural composure and confidence continued to draw admiration. Karen, both proud and cautious, reminded herself that her daughter was still a child. This was no ordinary news story. It was a story of instinct, courage, and untrained brilliance, and Karen wanted to protect Emma from the glare of fame while acknowledging her extraordinary actions. Officer Daniels had spent the past several days reviewing the footage of the courtroom interaction. Even after multiple viewings, he remained astounded. Rex, a K-9 trained for high-stakes scenarios, had responded flawlessly to Emma's subtle gestures and her whispered command. He contacted a few colleagues in the law enforcement community, showing them the videos. The responses were unanimous: disbelief, amazement, and intrigue. "It's unprecedented," one senior officer commented. "I've seen K-9 demonstrations my entire career, and I've never witnessed this level of intuitive communication from a child. It defies everything we understand about training, instinct, and age." The local news stations arrived at Karen's home for interviews, eager to capture the story behind the 3-year-old prodigy. Karen gently guided the reporters outside, keeping Emma close. Cameras zoomed in, lights flickered, and microphones hovered. "So, what's your take on the interaction?" a reporter asked Karen. She smiled gently, carefully choosing her words. "Emma is a curious, intelligent child," she said. "She's always been observant and unusually focused. But the connection with Rex, the precision, the intuition, was something truly remarkable. I'm proud, but I also want her to remain a child and enjoy her childhood." Emma, oblivious to the cameras, clutched her rabbit tightly, occasionally glancing toward Rex, who had been brought along for a follow-up demonstration. The dog, calm yet alert, wagged his tail slightly, acknowledging her presence. The demonstration that had caused a stir in the courtroom was now being relived outside, with Emma repeating the same gestures, the same calm authority, and Rex responding as flawlessly as before. Spectators and reporters alike whispered in awe, capturing footage and marveling at the improbable. intuitive communication between child and dog. Social media buzzed with clips from the courtroom demonstration. Videos of Emma's 2 words and Rex's flawless response spread rapidly. Comments poured in from across the country. Astonishment, admiration, and speculation. Headlines like "Toddler Commands Police Dog" and "3-year-old Stuns Courtroom" dominated local and national news. Karen watched in quiet disbelief, realizing that her daughter's moment of instinctive bravery had captured the hearts and imaginations of people far beyond Willow Creek. Emma, of course, remained unaware, smiling at Rex and occasionally pointing at the dog as if encouraging him to follow her quiet cues. The judge, Judge Harmon, received several calls from colleagues and news outlets inquiring about the extraordinary event. He responded carefully, acknowledging the unusual nature of the interaction while maintaining professionalism. "What we witnessed was rare," he told one interviewer. "A child's presence, clarity, and instinct led to a demonstration that was, frankly, unprecedented in my experience. It was awe-inspiring and unforgettable. I am certain that this is something that will be remembered in legal and law enforcement circles for years to come." His words amplified the recognition of Emma's extraordinary abilities, while maintaining the dignity of the courtroom event. Officer Daniels, now considered a mentor and observer in this story, began documenting the events carefully. He created a detailed report of Rex's responses to Emma's gestures and whispered command, noting every subtle adjustment, tilt of the head, and step of the dog. "This isn't just a courtroom story," he noted to colleagues. "It's an example of intuition and instinct, bridging age and experience. Emma's clarity and calmness have created a connection that could change the way we understand canine training and interaction with children." His observations sparked discussions among local law enforcement about the potential of observing instinctive communication between humans and trained animals. Meanwhile, Willow Creek's residents embraced the story. Parents brought their children to the courthouse, curious to see Emma and Rex. Schools incorporated discussions about courage, observation, and empathy into classrooms. Local businesses displayed photos and news clips of the toddler who had become the town's unexpected hero. Emma remained blissfully unaware, smiling and laughing, occasionally directing Rex with gestures and words that were barely audible. Her innocence, her instinctive clarity, and her calm composure inspired awe and admiration from adults and children alike. Karen continued to protect Emma from too much attention while embracing the extraordinary nature of the moment. She encouraged her daughter's curiosity, guiding her gently while ensuring she could remain a child despite the growing public fascination. Emma, small and delicate, had already changed the dynamic of her community. Her influence on Rex, the professional canine, had stunned adults, inspired children, and captured the hearts of reporters and law enforcement officers alike. Willow Creek would not forget the story of the 3-year-old who had spoken 2 words and created a moment of pure, untrained brilliance. The story of Emma and Rex had spread far beyond Willow Creek. News crews from neighboring counties, and even some national outlets, arrived to capture the remarkable tale of a 3-year-old who had, with 2 simple words, commanded a trained police dog and stunned an entire courtroom. Karen held Emma's tiny hand tightly as cameras and microphones surrounded them. Yet through it all, Emma remained blissfully unaware of the attention she was receiving. Her curiosity focused entirely on Rex. The dog, obedient and attentive, wagged his tail slightly at the sight of her, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been forged. The courthouse arranged a special ceremony to recognize Emma's extraordinary demonstration. Families, local officials, and law enforcement officers gathered, eager to honor the toddler who had captured the community's imagination. Judge Harmon stood at the podium, his usual stern composure softened by admiration. "Today," he began, voice steady yet filled with warmth, we celebrate a rare and remarkable moment. Emma, at just 3 years old, demonstrated clarity, courage, and instinct beyond her years. Her ability to connect with Rex, a professional police dog, reminds us all of the power of observation, trust, and intuition. Corinne's eyes glistened with tears as she watched her daughter sit quietly on a small chair, clutching her rabbit, oblivious to the accolades being shared on her behalf. Emma's calm demeanor and quiet focus had always been part of her nature, but today it was evident to everyone. The little girl's instincts were extraordinary. The courtroom demonstration, now etched into the memory of the town, had created ripples that extended far beyond its walls. Officers, reporters, and neighbors alike marveled at the seemingly impossible connection between toddler and K9. Officer Daniels knelt beside Rex, who remained alert and composed. "You've been part of something extraordinary, boy," he whispered softly, patting the dog's side. Rex barked softly, wagged his tail, and turned to glance at Emma, as if acknowledging her role in the event. The toddler smiled faintly, lifting a small hand toward the dog. The connection that had started in the courtroom was now recognized, celebrated, and respected. It was clear that the bond between child and dog was not merely a demonstration. It was a living, instinctive partnership that had captured the hearts of everyone present. Local reporters scrambled to interview Corinne and Officer Daniels, eager to capture every detail of the extraordinary story. Headlines formed quickly. Toddler stuns courtroom with 2 words, "Catch him," and 3-year-old commands police dog inspires community. Corinne smiled gently at the attention, but remained protective of her daughter, guiding her toward a quiet corner away from the flashing cameras. Emma, her brown eyes wide with curiosity, reached toward Rex, murmuring softly. The dog responded instantly, his movements precise yet gentle. The demonstration that had begun as a courtroom exercise had now become an emblem of connection, trust, and intuition that resonated far beyond Willow Creek. The judge presented a small, engraved plaque to Emma, commemorating the remarkable moment. For demonstrating extraordinary instinct, clarity, and courage, the inscription read. Corinne accepted the plaque on her daughter's behalf, placing it gently beside Emma, who inspected it with wide-eyed curiosity. The ceremony continued, filled with applause, cheers, and congratulations from families, officers, and local officials. Despite the attention and excitement, Emma remained calm, content simply to observe Rex and occasionally gesture subtly, as she had done in the courtroom. The community's admiration was tangible, yet the toddler remained delightfully unaware of her newfound fame. Even days later, the town buzzed with conversation about Emma's achievement. Schools incorporated lessons about courage, observation, and empathy, using her story as an inspiring example. Children imitated her gestures with pets, marveling at the power of simple communication and trust. Officers in the community shared stories about the demonstration, recognizing the potential implications for canine training and child-animal interactions. The courthouse that had once hosted a routine legal hearing became a symbol of the extraordinary, a reminder that even the smallest, quietest participants can leave an indelible mark. Corinne reflected on the past week, amazed by how a single moment had transformed their lives. Emma had always been observant and curious, but her calm focus, clarity of thought, and instinctive understanding of Rex had brought her recognition far beyond what Corinne could have imagined. The mother understood that this was more than a story about a courtroom or a trained dog. It was about trust, communication, and the extraordinary potential found in the simplest of gestures. Emma's innocence, courage, and instinctive brilliance had inspired her community, reminding everyone that greatness can appear in the most unexpected forms. Officer Daniels continued to monitor Emma and Rex's interactions over the following weeks. The bond they shared remained unmistakable. The dog responded with precision to subtle gestures and soft words, and Emma continued to observe, guide, and connect with a calm authority that amazed even seasoned officers. The demonstration had opened new discussions about training, communication, and intuition in law enforcement circles. Specialists and trainers marveled at the instinctive understanding between child and dog, realizing that Emma had demonstrated a natural ability that could inform future methods of observation and guidance in canine training. Programs. The community of Willow Creek also embraced Emma as a symbol of inspiration. Children brought toys to mimic her gestures with pets. Schools held storytelling sessions recounting her courage, and neighbors marveled at the toddler whose simple words had created a ripple of awe and admiration. Emma, however, remained delightfully unaware of her fame. She smiled, giggled, and interacted with Rex, focused entirely on the immediate world around her. Her innocence and instinctive brilliance had transformed a routine legal demonstration into a story of connection, trust, and wonder that would be remembered for years to come. Months later, a small memorial display in the courthouse featured photos of Emma and Rex, alongside news clippings capturing the moment that had captivated the town. Visitors marveled at the story of the 3-year-old who had spoken 2 words and commanded a trained police dog, transforming a routine day into a historic event. Karen often brought Emma to the display, allowing her to observe her own achievement with quiet pride. Emma would occasionally point at Rex, repeat her gestures, or whisper softly to the dog, reinforcing the bond that had begun months before in the courtroom. As the sun set over Willow Creek, Karen reflected on the journey they had shared. Emma's 2 words, "Catch him," had created ripples that extended far beyond the walls of the courthouse. The toddler had demonstrated instinct, focus, and clarity far beyond her years, inspiring a community, captivating law enforcement professionals, and capturing the hearts of children and adults alike. It was a story of courage, trust, and connection, a reminder that even the smallest among us can achieve extraordinary things when guided by clarity, calmness, and instinct. Emma, sitting on her mother's lap at the edge of the courthouse lawn, gazed at Rex, who wagged his tail and nuzzled her hand gently. Karen whispered softly, "You've done something incredible, sweetheart." Emma smiled faintly, her wide brown eyes reflecting innocence, curiosity, and the quiet brilliance that had captivated an entire community. Rex responded instantly to her subtle gestures, a living testament to the unique bond they shared. Together, they had created a moment that would be remembered forever, a moment where courage, intuition, and clarity transcended age, expectation, and training.